Follow me. Jesus issues this gentle invitation over a dozen times in the gospel stories. Follow me. Seriously, I actually think there are at least 14 instances of Jesus saying this inside the four gospels. He says it over and over and over, constantly inviting people to walk alongside him, to be in relationship with him, to travel at his pace, to head in the same direction, to spend time with him and share life together. The example of this invitation that is most striking to me can actually be found in 3 of the 4 Gospels. Here's how it reads in Matthew's Gospel. As Jesus went in from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. This story sounds like really straightforward on first glance, maybe even a little boring, but if you think about it, it is actually riveting if you consider the context. See, Matthew was a tax collector, an employee of the Roman Empire, an outsider to his own people, distrusted and assumed to be corrupt. The position at the time was seen as a sellout. He was literally sitting at a tax collection booth doing the work of shaking down passersby for money. He had a secure job. He had the safety of the Roman Empire's protection. He had a whole life and a whole identity as a tax collector. He was set. And then he just picks up and leaves. Think about how risky that was to just get up and follow this radical itinerant preacher, this rabble-rouser, this punk rock counterculturalist who was suggesting that you're supposed to care for the poor and heal the sick and welcome the outsider and see everyone as your neighbor. Think about how risky it was and how much trust it took for Matthew to follow Jesus. When Matthew got up from that tax booth, he wasn't given a roadmap. He wasn't promised an outcome. He wasn't told where his path would lead. The invitation wasn't, "Follow me, and here's how your life is going to turn out." The invitation was simply, "Follow me." Man, sometimes stepping into a relationship means trusting without knowing the destination. And then think about what happens because of that decision to trust, to walk alongside Jesus, to share life with him, to point in his life in the same direction and to be in relationship. Because Matthew follows, because he invites Jesus into his home for a meal, literally that's what happens next. Because he chooses to be in relationship, Matthew goes on to leave a legacy of transforming lives for thousands of years. He is credited for writing a gospel that centers the marginalized and includes outsiders. He goes on to travel to places like Ethiopia or Persia to share the good news with people in distant lands. He is a cornerstone of the faith. Matthew leaves his tax collection booth. Matthew sits down at a dinner table. Matthew is transformed. All because of a simple invitation and a profound choice to say yes. Now listen, I know there's a evangelical message baked into this story about choosing to follow Jesus and become a Christian. And I know not everyone who engages in between is a Christian. So let me say this. I'm not sharing this story because I think you should follow Jesus. I'm sharing this story because it's a beautiful example of the transformation that can happen when we take a chance on entering deeply into friendship and relationship with people. Relationships are risky. Jesus invites Matthew, and immediately after, Jesus is lambasted by the powerful people of the time for sitting with corrupt people like Matthew and other tax collectors and sinners. Matthew accepts Jesus' invitation. Immediately, he's at risk of retribution from the government that he has just abandoned. And he's without a job, and he's likely to be criticized by people on his left and right everywhere he goes. But the risk of relationship is worth it. The risk is part of what makes the space between us so sacred. It is scary to step into that space together, and it is also holy. When someone shows up with an open heart and invites you to follow them into a deeper relationship, it can be incredibly risky and scary, and it can also transform everyone involved. Here's a short blessing. Loving God, give us the courage to invite and accept the invitations we are given. Lead us not into isolation, but deliver us into togetherness. Help us know you by truly knowing each other. Amen. Between is about you. Take this message into your life this week and fill the space between you and every person you encounter with your sacred light. My favorite church is the space between people. Now go with God's love and create the church between.